Welcome, Paul. And after that, we'll have Jeremiah Ouyang coming.
Hi, guys.
Hi, guys.
How are you? Are you hungry yet? Okay, where can I put my ball? Here, sit down, guys. Okay, next to you. So, can you all raise your hands, please? Come on. You're not that tired. Come on, raise your hands, raise your hands. More, more. Okay, so the last ones where raise your hands, you probably work in enterprise. You're laggards. You're always late. Isn't that right, Auren?
It's definitely right.
Are we boring people in enterprise?
We are definitely boring. If you want to be exciting, be in consumer. If you're a little bit more staid and boring, be in enterprise.
Yeah, because if I ask you how many people are on Instagram or Angry Birds, you're all going to say, oh, yeah. How many people are enterprise here? Raise your hands again. Ouch. Yeah. But are you making a good living? Yeah, you're making money. That's a big difference between enterprise and consumer. You're actually making a lot of money. Nigel, do you agree with that?
Yeah, you know, the great thing about enterprise software is enterprises have lots of money and they pay lots of money. You know, we're a $100 billion company, and that's mostly enterprises. And the big companies that we do business with are hundreds of millions of dollars of business each year with IBM and with IBM's partners. So, you know, George was talking earlier about social in the enterprise. It's companies like IBM and like my colleagues here who big companies turn to figure out how to do that, and they pay.
They pay a lot.
They pay.
Salesforce.
We like that part.
Salesforce, you agree with that, JP?
Well, you know, if you really believe in consumerization, and we do, then the term enterprise starts meaning something different. I've yet to figure a company that has, you know, cost centers and profit centers that doesn't actually make money because a customer ponies up somewhere. So, you know, no customer, no enterprise.
No customer, no enterprise. But so is it really easier to actually build a self-sustaining business when you work in enterprise as compared to consumer software? Does anyone want to take that one?
Well, I'll start, but maybe my Auren might have more views on this. It's harder and it's easier. So the harder part is it's hard to sell to enterprises. The sales cycles tend to be long, they're political, there's lots of people involved. On the other hand, you're talking directly to the person who's going to buy from you, and you can get direct feedback. They can tell you need these features in and these features out, and that allows you perhaps to evolve the product more easily. Sometimes in consumer, it's hard to interpret the data. It's hard to understand why people aren't more engaged than they are, or why they might pay when they're not paying today. With enterprise, that part is much more direct. You ask them to pay, and they either pay or they don't pay based on the feature set and the other support and services capabilities you have. So that's a nice part about building an enterprise organization.
I mean, yeah, enterprise is definitely the tortoise, and the consumer is definitely the hare. So we're slow, we're plodding. You can probably tell that by the personalities of the people on this panel. Whereas, you know, consumer, you can jump out really fast and go like this. Enterprise, you can't go like this. You're more like this. Of course, consumer, you can also go like this. Enterprise, when you decline, you also usually decline very slowly as well.
JP?
I don't know. I tend to believe that the enterprise I was used to had too many proxy customers. So you were designing products and services for people who didn't actually exist. And what's been changing over the last decade is that the customer's been finding his voice. And that as a result of that, enterprises are finally beginning to build things that customers care about. So, you know, I think we're living in a new age. Sorry?
Do they?
Well, I think that's happening, yeah.
So how many in the room are working in a consumer-oriented either startup or company? Can you raise your hand a little bit? So we'll take a bet, the three of us. How many of you, if you come next year, is going to work with enterprise? What do you think? Raise your hand again. No, not that many. Are you making money with your consumer-oriented stuff? Yes or no? Yes, raise your hand. A little bit less hands than before. So enterprise might look like less sexy, but you make money right off the bat. That's exactly what he said. What is it?
Sitting here, okay. Would you call Apple an enterprise company? Would you call it an enterprise in itself? Just look at the number of symbols you're seeing.
Do you think it's an enterprise company or not? Guys, yes, no?
Right. If it's not an enterprise company, is it an enterprise itself? Okay.
Do you want me to answer the question?
I'm asking anybody the question. If it is an enterprise, how does service actually get to the customer without enterprise? Okay? We shouldn't be thinking about the theory of the firm in the construct of just capital and labor and product, but the engagement with the customer. You have examples over here of how people engage with the customer because someone has taken the time and the energy to say, I am going to build something for the customer. What is changing is people are deciding to involve the customer in it.
But that's why you call that a structural change in the customer, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the biggest structural change that I am seeing is that historically, one way of looking at IT is for the last 40 years, the voice of the customer has been in the past tense. You only find out about what the customer does after he's done it because it's at the point of sale, the till, the cash point, whatever. Over the last 7 or 8 years through activity streams, the customer started talking about I am doing rather than I did. And even more recently, the customer started saying I will do. Now, when the customer has moved to the future tense, the entire engagement of what an enterprise was has changed because warehousing, inventorying, product planning, everything turns upside down when you have a customer who says, I intend to, I will. Huge difference.
Nigel?
It's a great point. You know, enterprises are learning to engage with consumers using consumer processes, and enterprises are learning internally to adapt what we all in this room might think of as consumer processes as around how they do business. So, what's your next product? Kind of not that hard when you're a smaller startup. Fairly hard for large companies, some of which have very big, heavy machinery kind of products. We did a thing with Cemex. They make cement. Not the most exciting business. You didn't think anything could be less exciting than the three of us, but there you go. It's actually pretty hard to figure out how to make new cement, apparently. I don't know why. I'm not a cement engineer. But there's lots of regulations around the world. There's many different climates, all that sort of stuff. So all the kind of social technologies that the people in this room know really well are what Cemex used to go figure out across their global organization how to go build great new kinds of cement. And you know, this led them to sort of breakthrough products right out of the gate, as opposed to the old processes of, like you said, analyzing the past. So there's huge abilities to come into the enterprise and take all these kinds of ways of listening to and interacting with the customer and figuring out how to go attach it to some enterprise process and help them do something better.
Yeah, but up to now, most enterprise were actually divulging like 99% of the data surveys were about acquiring new customers. Only 1% was actually about learning about the current customers. Do you see a change in that, Auren?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we'll see we'll see a big change in actually figuring out what the current customer is doing. And it used to be that it was really hard to figure that out. You maybe can have 1 or 2 variables, maybe 3 variables. It was really, really hard. I think over time we're going to see, we've got great companies with Salesforce, with IBM, and they're making great hardware and software to be able to figure out what the customer is doing, both in the past, present, and future. And we're going to start to really give that customer a much better experience. So one of the great things that enterprise can do is it can help all of your consumer companies give your customers a much better experience than they've had before.
I guess JP, you agree, right?
Yeah, I mean the
That's
idea
your business model.
the idea of past predicts the future being useful, right, is like saying what would we have designed during a time of dinosaurs? You know, Steve Jobs said, if you connect the dots and all the dots are in the past, there's no possibility to disrupt. Right? Disruption requires you. I mean, one of my favorite sayings is, talent builds things other people cannot build. Genius builds things that other people cannot see. This act of envisioning something that does not exist requires a transformational way of looking at things. Now we have customers, trading partners, supply chain, enterprise. These are terms we used to use to separate what is actually one much wider integrated group of people, active, willing to give their feedback, willing to be able to be quite harsh on things you get wrong. But if you're prepared to listen and learn, we're talking about reducing waste in ways that we've never seen before, because you're stopped from doing the stupid things before you do them.
But as IBM, you're a very old company. very big as well.
We like to call it mature.
Mature company. A Cougar companies that work as well. Sorry for that one. So basically, have you seen a change? You've been in IBM for, I mean, this time 1 year, but overall, what, 10 years?
Yeah, I came in, we sold our company to IBM in the mid-90s, and I stayed for a decade.
So have you seen a change impacting IBM directly? Not only the products you're releasing, but actually the change how you actually engage with customers?
Yeah, very much so. You know, one is, like any company, you know, any public company especially, we have to increase the earnings per share number quarter on quarter on quarter, right? So we're delayering to get close to the customer, but we're also delayering to make more money. So it was kind of interesting to leave IBM and come back and realize there were a whole bunch of people around between me and the customer and between me and partners that aren't there anymore. And we don't actually need them to be there because we have different ways, better ways of listening to customers and listening to partners and suppliers and stuff like that. I mean, we're still a very large company. We're still 420,000 people, so you know the elephant can't turn instantly, having heard the message. But
it's not just better, right? It's faster,
yeah.
And it's more accurate because the responsiveness. I mean, today you can bring up a concept, build it, launch it, get feedback, and scale it up before the traditional large company has finished writing its business plan, okay? And that is partly because how technology has changed, how business models have changed, how the engagement models have changed. You know, it's like saying, 14, 15 years ago when Amazon said, instead of a warehousing and hub and spoke model, we're going to build a model of one book to one customer. That transformed an entire industry's way of looking at things. Now, we've spoken of terms like mass customization, probably from a time when there was a king on the throne in England. But we're finally coming to a point where that ability for deep personalization, not because the enterprise does it, but because the power is in the hands of the customer to do it. And it's happening. You know, Mark, my boss, said regularly, you know, you never saw a sign that said, you know, thank you IBM or thank you Microsoft. When you start seeing things like thank you Facebook.
Thank you Salesforce.
Okay.
I don't know.
Well, but there is a change because the customer is able to exercise a power and not just do that, but be listened to and see that listening. So, you know, bank charges get dropped. You remember whose guitars get whacked how. Yeah? If you change the way your company is structured without getting adequate feedback, you find out through your share price. That active feedback loop is critical.
Auren?
Well, personalized world is definitely a better world. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's what we're here are doing.
But you know, I think enterprises know that they're supposed to listen now, and they're starting to. They don't always do it well, right? And people in this room can help them with that simple part. But they have other problems that look simple and aren't that simple to deal with. So I was talking to some guys in health insurance. And
regulation?
Yeah, regulation is a big deal, but the creativity of the people in this room could help with that sort of stuff, right? Simple thing, I was talking to a health insurance company. They wanted to have a forum where people could sort of talk about their problems. You run into, in the US, the HIPAA stuff. I go say, my name's Nigel and it hurts me here. You can't have personally identifiable information. You see my post and say, oh, take aspirin. They can't have non-doctors prescribing, right?
His name's Nigel and
no, you also can't, right? So they want to put the power of all this social stuff to play in how their customers interact with each other, but they can't do it right now. Someone in this room or someone who should be in this room has to help them figure out how to apply the tool to that context. Yeah, and it's hugely valuable, right?
Until we solve some of those elements of privacy and confidentiality, right? And that's as much social as it is in terms of regulation or legislation, right? We are going to change the way. Right? Absolutely. Yeah. Like my children are my friends on Facebook. If I see my son friend somebody,
I'd be worried if they weren't, JP.
Yeah, no. If I see
You friended them. They didn't friend you, right?
no, they friended me.
Oh wow, you're a good dad. Boys or girls?
2 girls, 1 boy.
Oh wow,
But
impressive.
The point over there is that when they friend me and I see some activity of theirs on my newsfeed, if they see me pry into that, then the relationship of trust that I have with them would be broken. It's the same as saying if somebody lived in my guest room for a couple of days, I expect them to sleep in the bed, I expect them to use the shower, I expect them to use the shampoo, but not rifle through my drawers. So there is a relationship that is social about sharing. When we see social, local, mobile, we have got to understand there is also a sharing element in it. Part of what Nigel was talking about, even with the healthcare, is if you want to bring other people into it, we have built a whole industry of how not to share. Right. Yep. And figuring out ways of collaborating needs to unpick some of those things. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but we're currently at an unsustainable place to create value for that.
I want just Auren to, before we go on, just want, because most probably everybody in the room knows what IBM is, I guess and hope. Salesforce most probably, but maybe Rapleaf, maybe you want to say a few words, if people, because you're a smaller company.
Sure. What we do is we help companies learn more about their customers so they can give those customers a better experience. So we try to get those companies to give those customers a more personalized world.
Okay, great. Because I wanted, so you're basically our startup.
Yeah, we're a startup. We're not yet as big as IBM. Maybe next year we'll buy you guys. But
so basically you were born as a company. You were born in an era that's already social, mobile, and local. So are you leveraging all these three themes or not?
Yeah, we do our best. I mean, one question I guess we get all the time, or I get all the time, probably you guys do as well, is if someone out here is an entrepreneur, should they be starting an enterprise company or should they be starting a consumer company? Yeah, because that's a question I get a lot myself, yeah. And my advice to them is always to start a consumer company because I don't want more competition.
But was it harder? Why did you choose going into enterprise instead of like doing a photo sharing application?
I think a different personality is set for different things. So if you're really in touch with consumers, if you're in touch with the zeitgeist of the time, if you understand what's going on in popular culture, if you're really good with UI and design, then probably working in some sort of consumer-facing thing is better. You can grow much faster. If you're a little bit more staid, a little bit more of a tortoise, if you're maybe more interested in like very large engineering projects, if you have more of an engineering mind, then you can go into the enterprise. You can make a lot of money by really trying to solve a particular problem, and that's probably more of the personalities. I don't want to speak for the other people on the panel, but it's certainly more of my personality.
I just heard make a lot of money, which is something that sometimes with consumer-oriented apps we don't hear. JP?
I go back to Peter Drucker's. Peter Drucker said, the purpose of business is to create a customer. He also said, people make shoes, not money. Money is an outcome that comes from doing something well for a customer, not an end in itself. Okay? It is a byproduct.
Yeah.
And the way you have to build these things is, you go back to the theory of the firm, why you would even have a company. 100 years ago, it might have been said, it's to reduce transaction costs. So you vertically integrate, you reduce the cost of capital, you get global reach, you get scale. Today, most people in this room have a better credit rating than the bank that they bank with.
That's not very difficult these days.
Well, it happens.
Then again, I'm Greek, so you know.
Most countries appear to have a worse credit rating than the people in this room. So if that's the case, and the cost of capital is easier for an individual, if global reach and scale is available because of the web, then you start asking why create a company in the first place. And I think the most important reason you create a company now is because the aggregation of talent that you can bring together, because people want to come together around a set of values and ethics, something you stand for, that collective consciousness is able to build things, make things, listen to people, respond in ways that individuals cannot. So we're creating a collective consciousness for companies. The only reason you would not be a sole trader today, in a garage, is because you can do things in a collection of people. Many, it's not just the many hands. It's why open source movements have existed, because given enough eyeballs, all bugs are shallow. Are not just about code. You can fix things because you have this multidisciplinary beast that is a collection of intelligent, talented human beings. And that has never happened in the past because the technology to bring people together, not just physically, but logically, has been weak. Now we have good technology to be able to do it.
Maybe the biggest change I see, do you want to say something about that? Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to debate whether the technology is yet good enough. We've done a bunch of studies on the future of work. What will companies look like and who will the workers be, right? And they'll probably look quite different. There'll probably be different kinds of relationships, even in existing very large firms.
Absolutely.
So, do we really have the right stuff? I think we have the beginnings of the right stuff. But so there's I just want to point it out because I think there's opportunities there, maybe for our firms and maybe for firms in the room, right? I think there's interesting things going on there.
Seeing the death of the desktop, I think, is a big deal. Right? You go to most modern companies, like Salesforce. We bought a company called Heroku, and you go there. The first thing you notice is there are no desks. Right? It's a bit hard to argue about whether the desktop exists when there just aren't any desks.
Well, you know what? The first company I ever worked at, I go to the CEO's office. In the event, I have a computer. Yeah, I only had a typewriter. So if that's of course, I know the death of desktop. But what do you say actually implies something else? Was it not for years and years and years where you thought enterprise was leading the pack? Everybody was dreaming of the type of technology enterprise we're having, whether it's hardware or software. And now it seems that in the past 5 to 10 years, the trend is reversed, and that the consumer software and hardware is leading the pack. There's a bring your own device trend, like people bring their own devices at work instead of having the IT department giving them one. Do you see that? Do you think actually that consumer software and hardware is actually leading the pack or not? Auren first.
I think that one of the interesting things is that consumers are becoming so much more powerful, and that any individual in a company is becoming much more powerful and can create more stuff. And that's going to create a real distortion in work. So it used to be that maybe the best engineer was 3 times as good as the average engineer. And I think very quickly that best engineer is going to be 10 to 20 times better than the average engineer. And we're going to start seeing very massive disruptions in how people are paid, how people are compensated, how people are rewarded for that type of work as well. So I think over the next 10 years, I think a lot of these, a lot of the protests we see in the street are about this type of disruption that's going to happen. We're going to see a lot of disruption in the workplace, which is going to be good for a small number of people, maybe bad for some people as well, but it's going to be a lot of change that we as a society is going to have to deal with.
You see, the traditional company used to be seen as a hierarchy of product and customer. Right? So what you did when you ran the company was you measured product cost, product revenues, customer cost, customer revenues, had a bunch of overheads around it. And so the things you valued and how you structured everything to do with the company was around the product and the customer. More recently, the shift is to saying it's a network of relationship and capability. So valuing relationship is something that companies now have to do, and they don't necessarily have the tools to do that. So when Nigel says, I don't know whether the technology is ready, right? Yes, understanding how to value relationship, we're not yet there. Understanding how to value capability, we're not yet there. That's why we use terms like human capital and social capital and relationship capital, and at the first sign of any trouble, it disappears. Right? Today, the crazy element of that is I can only figure out that an enterprise values it when someone leaves. Okay? Because you slap a non-compete to say, the relationship capital you have, I want that to decay before you can work for anybody else. The knowledge base you have, I want it to decay before you can work for anybody else. But this idea that the value of those things is only in the breach has got to change. And the change is going to come from this other thing you mentioned, which was the adoption curve inverting. Because when a 14 to 20-year-old is the first place that technology gets tried, fashioned, and then starts working its way into the enterprise, their responses, their willingness to say, this sucks, this doesn't work, I don't like it this way, the voice that they have so that they have a megaphone to speak with, the tools to be able to listen to them, now mean that companies have the possibility of sucking less because they're going to listen. So going back to the boringness of companies, there is a choice. All the technology is in place for you to be even more boring, should you so choose, but in a few years you'll be dead. Right? It's not going to be that long. Talking about dead, yesterday when I was going to the airport, I saw a van with a company name called Colorful Coffins. I could not believe it. It exists.
Nigel, we're going to wrap it up. But Nigel, a few words, and then just conclude.
Yeah, I think we've been running around this boring word. I don't think it's boring. I think
You guys don't look like boring. I can
think
say
I'm
that.
pretty exciting, but I think there's cool stuff going on. I think the mobility stuff that everybody's doing is cool. We announced a bunch of mobility stuff today around tablets. That's cool. I think the stuff that's going on in development. You mentioned your Heroku stuff. I think that stuff's cool. You look at even IBM as a customer. You bring your own laptop. It can be Linux, it can be Mac, or it can be Windows. You load it yourself. There's enterprise app stores that we have and that are being developed and perfected. There's a whole bunch of stuff out there to invent that we're trying to invent lots of it. We're trying to find others who are going to invent the next wave of stuff. So I don't think it's boring. I think it's pretty exciting to take a lot of this consumer wave of information and bring it into big companies and help them serve customers better.
Thank you, guys. So we're going to wrap it up because, as you all know, we're running late. One last thing. We're going to continue the discussion on Twitter. Hashtag enterprise and hashtag LeWeb, both at the same time. And I'll just tweet these three usernames so you'll be able to talk with them.
Thank you, guys.